and that's why you never bring a hippie to a second location. No, we are live, and
What?
we were just noticing that someone told me I have to have a witty comment for the first thing that goes live every day, so I'm working on it.
Mm.
You know that line from 30 Rock, and that's why you never bring a hippie to a second location. I think that was one of the greatest lines.
I'm actually starting to watch 30 Rock because I never watched it regularly when it was on, but now that I have Netflix free promotion, I've been watching 30 Rock along with the shows that we've talked about before, like House of Cards.
Oh, House of Cards, Kevin, where are you?
I've completed both seasons, so
Okay.
I'm completely caught up. I've been gone for 2 weeks, haven't paid any attention to hockey, but I know everything about House of Cards.
No spoilers. No spoilers. I just finished Game of Thrones and I just started House of Cards, so no.
Oh,
spoilers.
so you got
No spoilers.
you got through Game of Thrones.
I got through it, and you know what? To be honest with you, the first 2 seasons were not that exciting, but I got really into it in season 3, and
I
season
told you
4 was
built up.
4 was awesome.
Yeah, it built background of the families and things that were going on. It's sometimes a little confusing, but it really gets good.
I didn't know what the hell was going on, and I mean, there's a little bit too much castration in that show for my liking. But I will say this: there's a lot of nudity in that show. I was not expecting that. And
why do you think I watch?
I bet.
I can take a little bit of castration, 1 or 2 episodes a year on most of my shows.
It just seemed it seemed like, I think it was season 3. It seemed like every episode someone got castrated. I'm like, really again? I have to go cry into my pillow again?
Too much phallic fixation.
Ugh.
No,
Really tough.
But it was overall, it's a good show if you look away from that. So.
And over the weekend, I mentioned it last week, a movie that I wanted to see over the weekend. I saw the A Most Wanted Man with Philip Seymour Hoffman and a few other notable actors. A really, really good sort of spy thriller. Unfortunately, it was the last movie he ever made, but it was a little slow in developing, but it was really good, along the lines of like a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy type of movie. Really good.
Oh, okay, that's pretty intense.
I have a hockey question.
Yes.
I listened to a radio broadcast about how golf is dying in America. So, what are hockey players going to do in the summer when golf is dead? Because I don't know any hockey players that don't golf. They all golf.
They're going to watch the Hockey Buzz webcast here on HockeyBuzz.com.
I don't think they're doing that, but yeah, no, that's something. I mean, my gosh, that's right. But is golf really dying? I mean,
well,
is it?
Yeah, well, they said, they sort of gave some pretty compelling evidence just on the number of. There's a golf course that closes in this country every other day, and there haven't been any new major courses built in forever, according to Jack Nicklaus, and they're big. It's still big in Asia and Europe, and they're building courses all the time. But in America, none of the younger people are playing golf.
Well,
so you know what is popular? Soccer golf. So
soccer golf is really popular on the beach this weekend when I was down there. That's huge on the beach.
Well, if you ask Josh, it's going to be squash. That's going to be a big sport.
Josh plays squash.
This morning I played squash and we had to wait an hour for a court at the gym because everyone wants to play. It's everyone, it's a lot of fun, and I think it's better than playing tennis, and it's very competitive.
It's like hockey tennis. It's like got walls. It's except if you can blow up the ball and you can play racquetball. You don't have to play with a dead ball. We play racquetball here in the States.
Well, I enjoy squash.
Well, the funny thing is around here in terms of summer activity sports.
This is the Hockey Buzzcast, by the way, for those watching. Just check. We are going to get to hockey in a second.
Last point here, and then we'll get to hockey. Softball has declined significantly in the last few years, and it's gone to kickball on softball diamonds. That's what people kickball on, because a lot of people can't hit, and then it's not really fun, but everybody can kick a ball.
This is the dumbing down of American youth athletics. Like, this is like the ridiculous. Like my daughter is just a crazy athlete, and at her camp they only play Nukem. They don't play volleyball because volleyball is apparently too difficult to play. So they play. I mean, come on.
Did you guys on podcast this week talk about Jeremy Roenick performing at the Celebrity Golf Tournament last weekend?
No, I would like to. We can start there, Kevin. Let's start there.
All right, let's do it.
All right, okay, here we go. We'll do Mike, Mike, Kevin, Josh, or Mike, Josh, Kevin, or Mike, Kevin, Josh. Mike, Kevin, Josh. Here we go. All right. It is the
Monday, July 28th.
Right. Monday, July 28th. Here we go. Smiles. I'm sorry, let me move this.
Porpoise.
Don't mind that.
Wow.
That went well.
Yeah, that was nice. That was smooth. Hey, everyone. It's Monday, July 28th, 2014.
I'm Michael Lagello.
I'm Kevin Allen.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
And I'm Michael Lind, and you're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. We are the podcast that brings you hockey news, even when it's really hot and there is no hockey news. But we find things to talk about, and we are so happy Kevin's back from vacation. And Kevin, you're more caught up on House of Cards than you are hockey right now.
Absolutely, and the only connection I had to hockey in the 2 weeks that I was gone was I watched Jeremy Roenick play golf on the Celebrity golf tournament in I don't know where it was located actually, but Tahoe. It was at Tahoe, and he actually finished second to former NFL player Mark Rippon. And it was actually fun watching him. He was actually looked like he was going to win it, and then there was a rain delay. And he lost it. He lost his magic. And then Mark Rippon made an eagle putt, and suddenly Roenick went from making $125,000, which I think the winner won, to making $57,000. As that was going down, I'm thinking to myself, how long did it take, like Gordie Howe, to make $57,000? And and Roenick made $57,000. Just playing a celebrity golf tournament. So.
Isn't that something? And last week we figured out that Lars Eller makes just under $300,000 per goal he scores. So, yeah, I mean, bless you, Josh. Yeah, I mean, and now where's Dan Quinn when you need him? I mean, come on, where's
I mean, has Roenick passed Dan Quinn as the best ex-NHL player golfer? Mike Modano's pretty good, but he couldn't play this year because he just had twins. Brett Hull's pretty good, but I didn't see him out there. So I know there's some others out there that play pretty regularly and maybe just don't get on this tour. But Roenick is a pretty accomplished golfer.
So that's impressive, I mean, I cannot play golf to save my life. I'll be the first to admit I've been out there on the course. Do any of you guys play golf at all?
No.
I mean, I play golf, but.
I'm hideous. I go to the driving range, and if I'm on the left side of the driving range, I end up hitting the people on the right side of the driving range, and I'm not aiming at them, so I don't play.
I used to play, but I spent too much time in the bushes looking for balls, and never mind. That just doesn't sound right.
It doesn't sound
Make your own joke. All right, so
anyway, yeah.
Too many double entendres there, please.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. No, I mean, well, Mario, right? Was Mario the best? Who was the best of all time? Mario was good, right, Kevin?
Yeah, it might have been Quinn actually. Dan Quinn was a terrific golfer. I'm trying to think. There are a lot of others. Mark Savard was a good golfer.
Dale Talon.
Dale Talon played in the U.S. Senior Open. Yeah.
Yeah, or U.S. Yeah.
Senior Open, yeah, for sure. Dale Talon is an excellent golfer. But now that he's in management, he doesn't really have the time to play and hone his game. It's funny how that.
And he's in Florida, for crying out loud.
And Mario, Mario is excellent golf. He used to have one of the big stops on the Celebrity Tour. Mario did, and then he stopped hosting that tournament and just concentrated on the fundraising. But I don't think he ever won his own tournament. I think Rick Rhoden, a former Major League player, won it at least one time, maybe a couple of times. But for years and years and years, the former NFL quarterback John Brody was one of the top celebrities. But now Mark Rippon, he was pretty impressive, draining a big, long eagle putt to take down Roenick. It was and basically Roenick told him to get out of there. He said, I don't want to talk to you. So
a couple other
basically the tournament to see who spent the least amount of time with their wives, because that's what golf is. Like golf is definitely the way, the getting away from. I can't dedicate myself to golf. To me, golf should be 9 holes, and that's it. Like I'll play 9 holes, and then I'm like another 9 holes, kind of thing. You know?
Well, the problem with golf is the time allotment. I mean, if you want to play 18 holes, it's an all-day project. You know, you got to get out there early. You got to putt a little bit. You know, you don't want to embarrass yourself. You got to, hit some balls. Then you play 5 hours to get through on a weekend to get through 18 holes. You know, you don't leave the course right away. You're with your buddies. You got to have a couple of ginger ales. Suddenly you've just wasted an entire day hitting a little white ball around.
Walking through a field. People in the chat room are saying Grant Fuhrer was a great golfer.
Yeah, absolutely. Grant Fuhrer, I'd forgotten about him. Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh.
Since my other job that I do, I work for Score Golf Magazine, and we pair up guys to play each other in a 3-hole playoff that airs on TSN. I can tell you right now, Joffrey Lupul, scratch golfer. Brian Elliott of the St. Louis Blues, pretty much a scratch golfer. Rick Vives, pretty close to a scratch golfer.
Yeah.
I mean, there's actually a lot of good hockey players that are really good at golf. Gary Lehman is a scratch golfer. So there's quite a few guys out there that are pretty damn.
Sleeps.
Yeah.
Lots of time on their hands.
I actually have a decent golf story. It was years ago, back when the Players Association had reinvented itself after Bob Goodnow took over. And they had the annual tournament. I don't even know if they still have it, where all the the current active players show up and play, and they invite some media members to come up, and then they invite some sponsors, and we'd end up golfing with the guys. And I golfed with Todd Gill and Steve Thomas and another gentleman whose name I can't remember. And I'm a twice a year golfer, maybe in recent years 8 or 10 times a year golfer. And we were playing on a very difficult course up north of Toronto. So I go up there, and it was like one of those days where I golfed my normal range by putting several drives out of bounds. I think it must have had 10 or 12 penalty strokes. But on that same day, I hit one and stuck it like a 1.5 feet from a par 3 and got a birdie. I chipped in from about 40 yards. I made a couple of long putts, when we needed them as a foursome. So it was a bizarre day for me. And we were done. I remember Steve Thomas came up. He said, "Kevin," he says, "no matter how I say this is going to come out wrong, but I really mean it as a compliment. That is by far the best 118 I've ever seen anyone hit in my entire life."
Well, I can't wait for the first. I can't wait for the first celebrity pro-am that Tyler Sagan is in, because based on his antics from a few weeks ago, it'll be an interesting performance.
Oh man! Well, speaking of interesting performances, on Saturday morning I woke up before realizing I was a little bout with my health on Saturday, but I'm totally fine. I won't even bore you guys with it. But before I realized my legs were blue, I was watching some really good hockey. And I turned on the NHL Network, and I was watching this really cool. I mean, they were playing the 1996 World Cup of Hockey, and this is when the U.S. and people were saying you only like this because the U.S. won, and it's not the case. I mean, this was like you had Gretzky and Lindros in this game. That to me was enough. There, you had this complete realm of it all, and it was just great hockey, watching back and forth. I mean, you had basically Mike Richter. The game I was watching was Game 2 of the series, and Mike Richter was essentially standing on his head in that game, and I guess was the whole series, the whole World Cup of Hockey. I remember it because part of it was played in Philadelphia in 1996. But as I'm watching it, it occurred to me and this is a question I have for you guys today. What was the best hockey you've ever watched? Like, what was the most? And there were 3 things that came to mind in my head. One was, the World Cup of Hockey in 1996, which was really good, and then, of course, the other was the Rendezvous series, which I always thought was as good a hockey as anything I'd ever seen, which I guess was in 86, 87 Rendezvous? 87.
Yeah. Now, do you mean the game that you were presently at, or game that you were watching on TV?
You have to be at it, and I wasn't at it. I wasn't at any of those. But to me, it was just. And it's kind of hard to describe. Not the most exciting. I mean, yeah, I guess the most exciting. But and whenever you use the word "best," that's such a weird word. But I think just the best hockey. And I also, thought of this year's Blackhawks LA Kings series. That was really good hockey in my mind. And just, what was the best hockey, because I was watching this, I'm like, this is just, I mean, it's crazy. The stars themselves, I mean, just the name is from one player to the next. I mean, it's just, Chelios running into Claude Lemieux, it was just all over the place, and it was great. But so maybe start with Gavin, because you've probably seen more hockey. We've definitely seen more hockey than anybody here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I've actually seen all those things you were talking about, and I would have all of them on my list.
Okay.
My favorite Stanley Cup final is actually the 1987 final with Edmonton and Philadelphia when the Flyers came back from a 3-1 deficit and forced a Game 7, and then they had the great Game 7, Nielsen, Anderson, Messier. I think they hit the blue line at about Mach 3 or 4. As I recall, and they were just flying down the ice, and they got that great goal. But the World Cup was a special tournament. I think people have forgotten that Canada won the first game of that, best of 3, and then they had to go to Montreal, which is like trying to slay the dragon in the dragon's lair. And this was, hockey's greatest American generation, and it was the difference of that generation simply was the emergence of power forwards like Tkachuk and Guerin. For the first time, the Americans had guys who could go in the corners and win those battles. In the past, Canada would go in and win those battles every time. They just didn't have the strength. They had skill on defense, and they had skill up front, but they couldn't win those battles. And that they had also had an edge as well. Down the middle, America had, Modano. Now Roenick didn't play in that, but Pat LaFontaine, guys like Smolinski filled in. Dougie Weight. Dougie Weight was gritty, very gritty player in that. Amonte played well in that tournament as well. But the emergence of Darian Hatcher also played a big role because he was a big feisty defenseman as well. So it was a great series for them to be able to come back in Montreal, and as you said, Richter was phenomenal in that, and Brian Leetch was really good as well, and Monty obviously scored the big goal. And the funny thing about that was the story of before the final game, Ron Wilson had asked Amani, are you going to be our Paul Henderson? And he said, no, I'm going to be our Mike Eruzione. And, of course, he went out and scored that goal. So it's big. And then the Rendezvous Series, but the one that you didn't mention, which to me was fantastic hockey, was 2002 Olympics.
Salt Lake City.
Canada was trying to, in Salt Lake, when Canada was trying to erase the long medal drought and, started out slowly and then built, and Gretzky was running that team, which added to me like another layer of mystique to it. And then, the buried coin story, and the Americans were playing great. Madonna was flying like the U.S. versus Russia game. Was one of the most phenomenal games I've ever seen in my entire life. And most of the guys I've talked to said the tension was incredible in that game. You could just feel it. So I would say those are my all-time favorites. And the Rendezvous was fun as well because there was still the sort of the Soviet still had the aura then during Rendezvous, and it was just a few years later that the wall would come down. So
that was right at the end of that. I know that's something. That Salt Lake City series, that was phenomenal. Josh, what about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I got two. One that I was at, one that I watched on TV. The one I watched on TV would have been 1987 when I was cheering for the Capitals and seeing the longest overtime in NHL history. I believe it was the longest one in NHL history. Fourth overtime, Pat LaFontaine scoring the OT winner in a 3-2 victory over the Capitals. That was probably one of the exciting ones because I was basically on my seat, and at that time I was 9 years old. So I'm like fighting off trying to fall asleep to watch this whole game, and my mom telling me to go to bed. And then I kept saying, no, one more overtime. And I ended up falling asleep in the last overtime, but I woke up to see Pat LaFontaine score.
It was the night before Easter, too. Remember that? That was the thing about that game, that long overtime game. It was the night
I got a story about that game, too, when we're done. But go ahead, Josh.
Yeah.
And the second one was this year. Honestly, best game I've ever attended. Blue Jackets coming from behind, losing 3-0 to the Penguins, coming back to win that game in overtime. One of the most exciting games I've ever seen in my life. Just seeing a team down 0-3 and then coming from behind to win that game. And everyone in that arena knew that they were going to come from behind and win that game, including myself. I couldn't believe it. They're just the feeling. I still get goosebumps. Like right now, all the hairs are standing up on the back of my neck just thinking of that whole game, that being there for that game, how incredible it was.
That was one of the most exciting games I've ever watched, I have to say, and I'm completely with it. It did feel like Columbus was going to win that game, and it was the weirdest thing because normally it might turn off a game at 3-0. It's just, because I don't really have a rooting interest or whatever, but I'm sitting there with my family. My family's like, oh, let's watch MythBusters. We want to change the team. I'm like, no, we're going to watch the end of this game. Something's going to happen in this game. So I felt justified. Just had that sense, and I was at the '87 Game 6 where the Flyers came back on the Oilers.
Okay.
That was the most exciting game I ever attended as a fan.
Yeah.
No question. That's the closest my team ever came to winning a Stanley Cup. That was that night was it. When we left that building, even though there was a Game 7, that was awesome. We had won that, and that. When J.J. Daigneault scores the goal, which I still think was tipped in by Scott Mellenby, that to give them the lead. That was something else. What was yours, Kev? What's your connection?
Well, I was going to say that game, the long overtime game in Washington, is memorable to my family because at the time my wife was pregnant with our second child, and even though I was living right outside Washington D.C. then, and normally I would have been at that game, but she was 2 weeks overdue, and I didn't go to the game. But I'm watching it on TV, and of course Bill Clement is taking off his tie and tying it around his head, and it's just the craziest game ever. And I thought it was going to end up as it really wasn't the longest overtime game. There's the famous Mud Bruno game, but I thought it was going to go forever and a day, and I thought I better be there. So I saddled up and whispered to my wife, who was sound asleep, "Hey, I got to go to the game. I won't be gone long." And I actually drove there. But my great fear was, especially anybody who had been to the Cap Center in those days, the way the traffic pattern was, once the game ended, you couldn't get in, because all the traffic was moving in. So I thought it would end, and then I'd be trapped. I wouldn't get in. But I got there just in time. I didn't even park my car. I just pulled it up to the door and just left it there. And I went in. They knew who I was. And I got in, and just as I got up to the press box and sat down, Pat LaFontaine scored. I ended up going down, interviewing, went back to the office, wrote up the story. When I'm done with the story, just the timing was unbelievable. My wife called and said, "It's time to go to the hospital." I went back to my house, picked up my wife, off to the hospital, and my daughter Kelsey was born shortly thereafter. Everybody said I should have called her Patty after Patty LaFontaine, but I didn't. I called her Kelsey.
Awesome.
So.
What a great story. Holy cow. That is awesome. I love that. I was just dying Easter eggs that night. That's why I remember it was the night before Easter. Mike, what about you?
Well, I mean, the '87 Canada Cup was phenomenal, and obviously, the deciding game at Cobb's Coliseum in Hamilton was one for the ages. Honestly, for me, something that made an impression for me as a young kid, late 1975 and early 1976, when the Russians played a series of NHL teams. I mean, everybody remembers the Montreal Canadiens New Year's Eve game against the Soviets, and Tretiak standing on his head. And I watched that game as a kid, but then subsequently I've watched it many times on video on YouTube, and that game made an impression. And obviously the Sabres played. I don't think they played the same team. They played. I think it was the Soviet Wings, and they destroyed them. I think it was 12-6. And that team, the CCCP team with Tretiak, played the Flyers, I think, a week later, and that was the famous game where if the Soviets wouldn't come back on the ice, they weren't going to get paid. So
that was on my birthday, by the way. That game.
Yeah, that one I haven't watched as much as the New Year's Eve game, but still love it for the international intrigue. And as somebody who's followed the Leafs, it has to be 1993. I mean, 21 games in 42 games, 3 Game 7s against the Red Wings, the Blues, and the Kings. getting as close as the team got to a Stanley Cup final. You know, Doug Gilmour at the top of his game, Wendell Clark. You know, a team that was not in the pantheon of phenomenal Maple Leaf teams of history, but you know, a very workmanlike team with a couple really great players, and they got as close as any team has gotten in to the finals in my lifetime. So you know, those are some of the best hockey that I've seen.
Yeah, that was good.
You know, one that we didn't mention, Eck, and I resisted doing it because you have to be over 50 to have any recollection of it. And fortunately, I am. But you know, the Summit Series was incredible hockey. And I was a young man in '72, and when that happened. But you know, it was a big deal. You know, the Soviets, nobody knew anything about them. Like, it's even hard to imagine. And today, the way we have information today, if a guy sneezes, you know, we hear about it. But back then, you knew nothing about the Soviet players, other than they kept winning world championships and Olympics. And for them to, you know, play against the NHL, I mean, I remember as a kid, everybody talked about, oh yeah, they're just going to crush them, they're going to roll right over them. You know, these Soviet players, they haven't faced pros yet, they're pros themselves, but wait till they face our guys. And suddenly you saw the Soviets, and they were, you know, on Hockey Night in Canada. And, you know, this is only big, obviously, to Canadians and those of us who were fortunate enough to live on border cities and got Hockey Night in Canada, because that's what it was on. But, you know, there were some great storylines there. Obviously, Bobby Clark breaking Harlamov's ankle, you know, Phil Esposito giving him the, you know, I'll cut your throat sign. You know, it was just terrific. And then, you know, obviously Henderson, you know, scoring the big goal. Like, I don't know whether you could, because of the era that it came in, that you could replicate, you know, the emotion that you saw in that series and how everybody was talking about it. But, you know, they weren't talking about it much probably in Philadelphia and Boston and those areas. It was primarily in Canada, and as I said, in the border cities where we watched it on Hockey Night in Canada.
That's awesome. There are a couple over 50 in the chat room that are right there with you on that one.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was... You know, I just, you know, I resisted bringing it up because I know most of our listeners are not over 50. But, you know, like, I don't even know, you know, other than the Lake Placid game, obviously, which we also didn't mention, but I thought we were talking NHL primarily. You know, you couldn't really have matched that. Like, every game that we've talked about, probably in terms of pure emotion, couldn't come close to matching that '72 Summit Series.
Yeah, that had to be the one. I really go ahead, Mike or Josh. Josh, go ahead.
Josh,
go. I just wanted to throw another one at you guys. As you know, I picked up Rats in Florida when the Panthers went to the Stanley Cup Finals. The first round, I was working for Sunshine Network as a stage manager with Paul Kennedy, who now does the Tampa Bay Lightning game. So the first round, I'm a stage manager for him, and I'll never forget the series against the Boston Bruins with Bill Lindsay undressed Raymond Bourque. No one expected that to happen, and when that happened, that was amazing. And that whole play, that big goal, is what started the whole run for the Panthers to the Stanley Cup Finals, and that was pretty magical too. Taking out the Pittsburgh Penguins and having to ask Tom Barrasso to clear the crease so I could go grab the rats that are in his net. Not one of my favorite stories, or not one of my favorite things to ever do. Trust me, because I got the grunt when I asked him, and that was pretty scary. But that was
a friendly guy.
The Barrasso grunt.
Yeah, Mr. Barrasso, can you please move so I could grab the rat? So it was pretty scary, pretty intimidating going on that ice to grab those rats in the bad places. So.
Well, proof that I'm a hockey nerd, I own the DVD box set of the Summit Series, so I have all 8 games of the Canada-Russia Summit Series, and the complete Game 8, the complete, I think it's 3.5-hour broadcast of Foster Hewitt. It's in its entirety. It's a great thing. It's just something that every once in a while you just pop into the DVD player and watch. It's phenomenal.
I have the actual VHS tapes that I taped of the Rendezvous series, so I have them.
VHS
from the TV. Yeah, I have that.
Got to convert those to DVD.
I know.
Yeah. One single game that is worth mentioning too was obviously when the Flyers played the Soviets and they faced the Broad Street Bullies. I mean, that was such a memorable game. It was on, as I believe it was broadcast by NBC was doing it, right, at that time?
Yeah, they play it a lot back here. We see the highlight of it on our network. Yeah, it was NBC network.
Yeah, it was NBC. So they played it, and I remember everybody watching that. And Joe Falls, who was a hockey-loving Detroit columnist, wrote, I still remember his lead. It was the Soviets cried uncle, and it wasn't Sam. That was his lead for that.
That's a great one.
After that game. And, I mean, again, that was emotional for fans because they felt like if the Soviets had to play NHL-style roughhouse hockey, they couldn't survive. And, certainly that was evident in that game. They didn't enjoy the Flyers' tactics.
Well, there was so much to that game, and I've always said that, the Flyers, of course, Ed Snider became big in Philly because the Flyers won their 2 Stanley Cups, but he became a god in Philly that day. That was the day that things changed, where Ed Snider will never be able to do anything wrong in the city because, first of all, this is Philadelphia Independence Hall, Constitution, City of Brotherly Love, all that stuff. So here we are, the evil Russians coming to town, and them walking off the ice. And Ed just not being afraid or about any red curtain or anything like that, and just goes up and says, just lays it on the line to them. That was great. I mean, it was that was the moment when all Flyers fans can they point to that, I think, to realize the respect that Ed Snider has. I had a really great interview the other day with Jim Nill on XM Radio, where he was talking about something that I didn't realize, and this is a good story I wanted to work on at some point, was the story of the 1980 Canadian Olympic team, which is like a whole different ball of wax, and he was sort of, because he had scored a couple goals, he scored a big goal, and they came very close to beating the Russians as well. We all think of the Miracle on Ice as being this incredible thing. They actually had a 3-1 lead on the Russians, and then lost the game, and Nil scored the first goal in that game, lost 6-4, and he basically said there was an empty net goal, but the 5th goal was a misplay by the Canadian goalie or something like that on an icing. So he said basically, we had that game tied, and we blew it, and then the rest was history. But that Canadian team had blown away. They beat the Netherlands 10-1, and they beat Poland 5-1, and obviously those aren't great teams. But with all that's been made about the 1980 Miracle on Ice team, it would have been interesting to see they've had the Canadians beating the Russians there.
And that team did have a couple prominent NHL players. I mean, Glenn Anderson was on that team, and Randy Gregg and Neil and Paul McLean. They did have a few players who would go on to NHL success. I mean, like Team USA. I mean people don't seem to realize. I mean that wasn't. I mean, it was the Miracle on Ice, but look at the number of NHL players who were top end NHL players played on that Team USA from Lake Placid. I mean, not Neil Broughton, Mike Ramsey, Kenny Morrow. I mean, there were a lot of players who had pretty good NHL. Dave Christian.
Well, they were playing.
Yeah, I mean
go ahead.
Yeah, that's one of the great myths about that 80 team, that it was a bunch of ragtag, college players that, epitomized by Mike Eruzione, who probably qualifies as sort of a ragtag, minor league pro player. But, as Mike just said, down at center ice, their center ice was Magic Mark Johnson, Neil Broughton, and Mark Pavlich, and Mark Wells, who was a pretty good role player at that time. And then, on defense, obviously they had Ramsey and Morrow and Christian, and, Craig played out of his mind. So the team was a lot better than people realized back then.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And but I wonder what how this whole I couldn't help but think how this whole thing would have been changed had Canada managed to pull off that victory against the Russians, and then it makes you suddenly think about, well, maybe the Russians just were not that good that year. That's the other thing that occurred to me. I mean, they were always powerful, but the U.S. beating them, that's one thing, but they almost lost to Canada as well. And it was a Canadian amateur team too. I mean, that Russian team was obviously the big stars.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that most of that team played against the NHL. The NHL All-Stars in the Canada Cup the following year. I mean, it was still Trechek, it was still Boris Mikhailov, and they beat Canada for the only time in the Canada Cup, I believe. I think it was best of 3, and they beat them. I think it was 8-1 in the final game. I remember Mike Liute giving up a bunch of goals and looking like a sieve. But yeah, I mean, and the previous year that team beat the NHL All-Stars in the Challenge Cup, I think it was called. So yeah, right. I mean, it was just a everything, the stars aligned and everything fit for Team USA at Lake Placid.
And then there's the '84 team, which I always thought was a pretty darn good USA team as well, Kevin. I mean, the '84 team.
Yeah, nothing went right for that team.
Yeah.
First of all, it's impossible. To be a coach of that team, I don't even know why Lou Vero said yes, because you can't win. You can't follow up. The 1980 team, because the circumstances were all different. But their best players were their youngest players, and that never is a good thing. LaFontaine and Olczyk, and Jensen. Yeah, Ali Frady, Jensen. Those were all exceptional players, but they were all teenagers. And Chris Chelios was 20 years old or 21 years old at the time, and only played a couple of years at Wisconsin. They just didn't really. They weren't as experienced as that 1980 team, and it kind of showed. And the other thing is everybody was gunning for the Americans in '84 after their the big upset. So they didn't get Barrasso. If you remember the story on that too, that was kind of funny as well.
No, I didn't know that one.
The Buffalo, he was going to be their #1 goalie,
Right.
even though Mark Behrens had done pretty well at the college level at Wisconsin. And had won a national championship. But Barrasso, I think the coaches believed he ultimately was going to win that battle. But they were playing up in Alaska, and one of the Knox brothers asked Lou Vero, the coach, can we come up and talk to him? That's all we want to do is talk to him and just say hello. And Lou said, yeah. And then next thing you know, Barrasso got on the Knox's plane and flew back to Buffalo and signed. And, had he not signed, maybe it would have been a different story, because we all know how well he played in his rookie year. Yeah. He was outstanding. He was certainly head of the class in terms of being a young goalie who was ready, to play. So, it could have been different. It was just one of those things where everything went right for the 1980 team, and everything went wrong. I mean, Chelios played in the opening game, broke his ankle, and played on that thing the entire Olympics. And they didn't really even know how bad it was till after the Olympics.
Wow. Yeah, that team was more, when you think of that great team that we talked about to start the whole thing, to bring back together that '96 team, there were more players on that '84 team than there were the '80 team. That was more of like the right, because you had more like the LaFontaine and Chelios and those young guys who would become part of that '96 group.
Right. Well, I mean, the '80 team opened doors. I mean, it's almost forgotten. I remember Mark Johnson told me the story that prior to the '80 Olympic Games, we talk about now one-way and two-way. He was offered a three-way contract by the Pittsburgh Penguins. He had one salary if he made the NHL, one if he made the AHL, and one if he had to go to even a lower, level minor league team. So it was 3 different salaries. He had a three-way contract offer. And that's the way they viewed American players. There were a few of them in the league, but they often viewed them as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
We let Kevin froze for a second there.
Yeah. I was going to say that the '80 team had a lot of, sort of players who ended up being middle of the road NHL players, like Steve Kristoff and Bill Baker, who they got NHL contracts. They played for a couple of years. Whereas the '84 team, I mean, after the star players like LaFontaine and Chelios and Iafrate, there was like the David A. and David H. Jensen guys, those type of guys. I think the top end talent was better on the '84 team, but the depth was probably better on the '80 team, because I don't remember the entire roster. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but there wasn't a lot of those middle of the road guys who ended up having NHL careers from the '84 team.
I just remember being really angry that the Islanders were getting both LaFontaine and Pat Flatley. Like that to me seemed hardly fair at the time. The 2 captains from Canada and the U.S. That's kind of crazy. But yeah, so we got you back, Kev. That was good stuff. All right, so let's talk a little bit of actual hockey, and then but this is fun. I wanted to talk. There's not a whole lot going on. It's kind of a slow Monday, guys. So I wanted to get into this. It's kind of this this is really good. This is the kind of stuff I live to talk about. So, but we will talk a little bit about what happened. Derek Brassard has signed a 5-year, $25 million deal. Josh, what are your thoughts on this one?
$5 million. He had a good playoff. I don't know if he's worth $5 million, but I mean, I guess with the way the money that guys are making now, I guess that's the kind of money you should be paid. But I think it's quite a bit. Obviously, he got more money because he took longer term, and because he was asking, I think, for like 4. Well, was he asking for 4 or 4.15 or something like that?
I heard he was asking
It was
for
over
$5.
$4 million. Yeah.
Yeah. But $5 million a year. Damn, I really should have tried harder at being a hockey player.
Yeah, what you got to do in these contracts is to adjust the psychology of the contract for inflation, and that's the hardest thing for everyone to do. Yeah. And what I always try to remind the fans is, what would the salary cap be at the end of this contract? It'll be over $80 million. I think it will be.
Oh yeah.
And if that's the case, you can have 18 players and an $80 million cap making an average of $5 million a year. Or you can have them making an average of $4.7 million, 18 players, then pay 4 or 5 players at whatever the minimum is. So the average salary is going to be probably $3 million at the end of this contract. So, and he's an above average offensive player, and he's performed well in the playoffs. I thought this was an important signing for the Rangers. I think it reinforces who they're going to be moving forward. And I thought tying him up for 5 years, if you look around the league, you identify your core players and you get them signed. That's what the Rangers did.
Yeah, and for those scoring at home, that's now 16 arbitration cases that have been settled prior to the arbitration. Still only one has actually gone arbitration, a player not even in the league, Valery Sobotka.
Right.
Vladimir Sobotka, sorry.
Let's remember that the arbitration process is designed not to go to arbitration. The idea of arbitration is to force the two sides to make a deal. So it works very, very well. No one wants to go through arbitration because you end up saying negative things about a player you like. You have to basically cut them down. And say, point out their flaws. Nobody wants to go to arbitration. This is designed to get the two sides together, and it almost always works.
Kevin, do you know how many cases went to arbitration last year by any chance? Because I was trying to find that out yesterday.
No, I don't off the top of my head. No. But it's rare that they end up going to arbitration. We all know that. I mean, it's a very low percentage that actually make it to the actual procedure.
Cushiest job in the world, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a good job to be the arbitrator. It's like the.
I'll take it.
Right. It's like the clothing of the king. No, to me, I mean, what you say, Kevin, is true. But I don't know if I would have identified Brassard versus say Kreider and Zuccarello as the core. Like I think that. I mean, here they go. They went 1 year with Kreider. They went 1 year with Zuccarello. I still think those guys are the guys that are going to be more impactful over the next 5 years.
Well, I mean, I think they all are, but I'm just saying, if you had an opportunity, your core group is obviously a small group of players, and probably all the players you mentioned are in that group. But and in this case, they were able to tie up one of them long term, and they did. Maybe the other guys were not, interested in doing that. I mean, there is some obviously disadvantages to long-term contract if you have faith in your ability to turn up the volume a little bit. I mean, I guess the only argument against the deal is how big a score is Brassard going to be?
Right.
It is what you see, what you're going to get, or can he take it up another 10 or 12 or 15 points, or 20 points?
Mike.
Well, I mean, right now I think Brassard hit the jackpot in the sense that they brought out Richards. I think that he was 1 year away from being an unrestricted free agent. I don't think the Rangers really wanted to have him and Zuccarello go to UFA the same year, and so the Rangers saw the opportunity here, and then they bought 4 years of unrestricted free agency away from Brassard. Down the road, as Kevin said, 4 or 5 years down the road, $5 million might be the average salary if it goes up to $90 million or something like that. So I mean that. I think it's sort of beneficial for them to get him locked up on a long-term deal. And if you look at it next year, Marty St. Louis is a UFA, probably retires after next year, and that opens up the money for the Rangers to sign Zuccarello. And they don't. And with Kreider, he's coming off his entry-level deal. He's going to get the bridge deal. They don't want to sign him to the long-term deal right now unless they're completely convinced he's going to be a superstar. And he's only had one really good year at the NHL level, so I think they're going to go with the bridge deal for him.
True, Josh.
One question for you, Kevin. Actually, before I get to the question, 6 guys are left right now on the arbitration list. The next one up is Jimmy Hayes tomorrow. His salary made last year $687,500. Other guys: Dwight King, Justin Fontaine, Nick Spaulding, Michael Frolik. And the last one, which is the big one, PK Subban.
Yeah.
Kevin, do you think PK makes it to arbitration, or do you think the Canadians will strike a deal with him prior to that arbitration hearing, which is scheduled for August the 1st?
I think he's going to sign. I bet around the league, though, there'd be a lot of players, and I'm assuming that even the Players Association would love to see him go to arbitration.
Right.
Because obviously he has the kind of numbers that really work in an arbitration hearing. So, but I mean, it's not in the Canadians' best interest to go to arbitration. I mean, they're going to want to get him signed, and I mean, he's so important to the Canadians. You have to identify the players. That's what I loved about the Blackhawks' handling of Kane and Taves. They just said, hey, it's going to cost us a lot of money. They're too valuable. We don't want to mess with it. We don't want to anger anybody. Let's just get it done. And I think that's what the Canadians have to do. I mean, Subban has proven that he's a difference maker, and the guys like him are difficult to find. Does he have some flaws? Sure, but everybody does. So
Yeah.
I say get him signed and move on.
Well, the question is,
to go high. He's going to be the highest paid defenseman in the NHL. Do we all agree on that? I mean, I think that's going to be the case.
I think so.
Yeah.
But the question is the term of the deal. I mean, I think the point of view from Mark Bergevin is to get him locked up for 8 years.
Right.
I mean, it would make sense because he's one of the best defensemen in the NHL. But PK Subban might want the short-term, say, 2-year deal to put him on the doorstep of unrestricted free agency and be able to sell himself to the market in 2016 or 2017 or whatever, how long the deal is. I mean, he could be the highest paid player in the NHL if he hits the market as a UFA at age 25, 26.
Right, and also don't forget that this is Montreal, where the taxes are what they are, and a lot of money comes out of there, and so his big contract is not as big as it would be, say, in Dallas or in Florida. So, I mean, that's the other thing.
Will he be taking a page from Ryan O'Reilly? Because if you look at Ryan O'Reilly, I think that deal, that was the point of view of that deal. He's going to walk as a UFA away from Colorado in 2 years, or he's going to be traded before then. If Subban wants to stay in Montreal long term, and I've never heard anything to the contrary that he doesn't, then I think that it's beneficial for him and for the Canadians to get him locked up for long term for 8 years. But if he's hedging his bets, then I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 2 or 3 year deal.
For sure. Okay, last little thing to talk about is Evander Kane, everyone's favorite rumor person to talk of. This is a hard one to judge, Kev. I mean, I don't know where this is going. I mean, and Cheveldaev has been really mysterious about this.
Yeah, it is difficult. Now, I've been gone for 2 weeks, so I really haven't done any checking on it, so I have no insider information. But
I think it's really changed, honestly, in 2 weeks. Exactly what it was when you left.
My take on the Jets, and I wrote about this at the end of the season, is they're on the treadmill. And it's hard to get off that treadmill when you're just good enough not to get a high or an early draft pick. It's hard to get better, and they're on that road where they're okay, they're decent, they're competing for a playoff spot, but they're not getting in the playoff spot. They're not getting the franchise style player. I feel like they need to do something big now, whether that's trading Evander Kane or Byfuglien or whatever. I feel if you're going to use Byfuglien at forward, you should trade him.
I agree with you.
To me, he wants to be a defenseman. I think you get a lot for him. I feel as a forward, he's just an average player.
Yeah.
You don't get the same value that you get as a defenseman. So if that's the case, you can probably get more value out of him by trading him. But they don't seem to want to do that. So maybe Kane is the way. I mean, you get a lot for Evander Kane, and it would change the dynamic of that team. So that's the argument for trading him. The argument against him is pretty simplistic. He's a highly skilled player. They're hard to come by. He's been he could be part of the solution if you just let it play out.
It doesn't seem like you're going to get value for him no matter what you do. It's that kind of situation. Josh?
Yeah, we got some breaking news here, guys.
Okay.
I promise it's a better signing than I've said before. The Red Wings have just agreed to terms on a 3-year deal with Thomas Tatar.
Okay.
And I really like this kid, and I think he's going to be a star in the league.
No, I'm a big Tatar fan.
I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, is anyone shocked that they
No.
got him signed? I mean, he's a really good player, and they see him as part of his future. All the rumors about him going to Buffalo were bogus. Wasn't going to happen. They see him and Nyquist as the guys that are part of their future.
For sure.
What kind of money do you think he'd be making, Kevin?
I'm sorry?
What kind of money do you think he'd be making?
Well, with a 3-year deal, I think it's got to be over a couple million.
Yeah. 2.5, I would guess. Something in that range.
Yeah, that's what I'd guess too.
Now let me just touch quickly on the Kane stuff because you brought it up in your recent blog and connected it to Toronto, and not to make this Leaf buzz.
No, I know, and I hated connecting it to Toronto, but I just talked to 2 people today who connected it to Toronto, and mainly what has to do with that is this James Reimer deal, which is connected as well. James Reimer signing a 2-year deal with Toronto, from my best source in Toronto tells me that he first of all he didn't want to stay there, he didn't want to stay in Toronto, and he wanted out. So then you hear that then he signs a 2-year deal. So I call my best source back and I say he wants out, but he just extended himself for 2 years. That made him more tradable, is what I was told, and and there is an obvious need in Winnipeg for a goalie. I'm actually a fan of Pavlik, but a lot of people aren't, and he for good reason. I mean, he hasn't proven himself to be the guy. He has his moments when he's a really good goalie. So this kind of connects. It's more. I think it's more of a dot connecting thing going on. But the one source I talked to said, "Well, I can tell you this: Toronto is a lot more open to Vander Kane than they were a week ago." So it's not a lot, but it's something.
The Reimer deal is slightly front-loaded, 2.6 in the first year, $2 million in the second, which leads you to believe with the goaltending market out there right now that what they're doing is they're probably thinking of keeping him this year, at least for the bulk of the year, and hoping he improves his value because his value was down after a good lockout season, but then the calamity in Game 7 in Boston, and then playing pretty much subpar after the Olympics last year. I think what they're trying to do is they want him, with Randy Carlyle and hopefully the team playing improved defense this year, to put up a good year as Bernier's backup, improving his value. Everybody knows that he has the ability to be a starter. If he has the durability to be a starter. And then once that's done, maybe at the trade deadline and maybe over the summer, next summer, then he gets moved and his contract is only $2 million in the final year of the deal. Now the thing is, from all the indications that we've made on the webcast and everything that I've heard out there, this Evander Kane situation, I think Winnipeg wants to solve it this summer. I think they want to get it done now because I think this has a possibility of festering later on. As if the season starts and if he continues to make the noises that he's been making the last few months. So
it's a small town Winnipeg. It's tricky, but they won't trade him unless they get a really good value. So they're in that spot. They're in that spot. They definitely would rather him not be saying the kind of things he's saying and rather him not be in social media. And I'm wondering how long it is till hockey players aren't allowed to be on social media. That's another topic for another day, but I'm thinking that that's coming in the next year. I really do. We already see that NHL referees aren't allowed on social media in their contract, correct? So,
Well, I'll give you one indication, Ack. There was a media relations guy for an NHL team that I saw at the NHL draft, and I overheard him say when somebody said that all the 18-year-old draft picks were on Twitter, he rolled his eyes.
Yeah.
So, it is a burden for the club.
It's a tough situation. I mean, come on, think about it. It's a really tough spot because do we have a right as a society to tell people they can't be on social media? Is social that I guess is my question. Is there a right for that? And I wanted to ask you this, Kevin, before we leave on this last question. Glad you got back in. What I was just saying to Mike, do we have a right? Does a team have a right to ask a player to not be on Facebook and Twitter? Is that like something that is that like an inalienable right? Is that your ability to be able to you can speak your mind? You're allowed to talk. They can't tell you not to go into a bar and speak. Do they have a right to do this, Kev? And we probably don't lost. Kevin's thinking about that one for a while. He's not sure. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Mike? Do you think that should be allowed? That's okay?
Well, I mean,
live in a country where.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Go ahead, Kev. Sorry. We lost you, but we're back now. So what's your thought on my question there? Did you get my question, Kev?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yes.
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't think they have any. I don't think they have any right. I don't think they have any right to tell.
I agree with you. I do. I definitely agree. I agree. I don't think they should be able to do it. But I think that is just one of those things. It's part of your thing. Go ahead, Mike.
Once they specify in the contract, I mean, it's the contracts are the limitations of the contract are collectively bargained when the CBA is done. I don't know if right now you can ask a player or limit a player to not be able to talk or communicate on social media. But if it was collectively bargained, you can collectively bargain anything because.
Yeah.
And once that is done, I mean, if the NHL teams want to control their message, don't want their players to put out their name and be on Facebook and be on Twitter and make comments because it can affect their value or it can for whatever reason, then I think what will happen is you won't see them on there anymore.
Yeah, I think that is what will happen. I think you're right, but it has to be. It definitely has to be something that's in the collective bargaining agreement. You can't just.
Right. You just can't.
And people are laughing about inalienable rights on Twitter, and Twitter's not in the Constitution. No, it's not. But Twitter is speech. It's our era's version of free speech. It's what we have. It's what we are. And countries get destroyed for limiting. Like countries in the Middle East and China get killed for not allowing Twitter. Like that. This is something that people are allowed to do. Should be allowed to do. If you're banning Facebook, things like that.
You don't think that Evander Kane's value as a player was affected adversely by him being on a balcony in Vegas with "Show Me the Money"?
No question. And I also think it affected Dan Ellis, to a degree. And back when he said something like it affects players. There's no question. And another thing that's being brought up is true that NHL teams use social media as part of their ammunition, and that's absolutely the case. But what I think needs to happen, honestly, is, and I've said this for a long time, is teams need to give their players classes on social media, actually teach them how to do it. And teach them what not to say, and teach them the language of the internet, and teach them what kind of things piss people off on the internet. You can't just say whatever you want.
Well, I know that Toronto in their recent rookie camp that they had after the draft did have classes where they let their new draftees know about social media and about dealing with the media, and I think that was part of it. I mean, obviously, I didn't have any exposure to what they were telling them, but I would assume that was part of it. Yep. But just like in other sports, and I'm sure it's in hockey as well, where you tell players, okay, you can't ride a motorcycle.
Right.
You can't go skiing. Kellen Winslow Jr. broke his contract riding a motorcycle and ended up hurting himself. That's
a great point. That's a great point, and that's why you can write into contracts. You can give away your rights in a contract.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this is one of those things that it's a little different than, I mean, I guess you can sit there and say that it hurts your value. It hurts the team's value if you say something stupid on Twitter. You're definitely hurting yourself if you. The whole argument behind not being able to ski or ride a motorcycle or what have you is like, that you're going to hurt your team's value because you're going to get hurt and then you're not going to. They can't sell tickets. A little harder, a little bigger stretch with Twitter there, but.
Yes, but in a day where something that you do, even if it's off the playing field and it has nothing to do with being injured, I mean, it can affect your reputation. And does a team want to trade for a player who has a reputation that they don't think is conducive to the team that the fan base that they have? So I mean, it can, the players, what they say and what they express on social media. I mean, hey,
yeah.
Tim Thomas.
Right.
How much did Tim Thomas's value go down after the Chick-fil-A stuff, after the Obama stuff?
It was enormous. I mean, remember Tim Thomas was coming off of of one of the best seasons an NHL goalie had ever had. I mean, He was. So yeah, and then a couple years later, and he can't get a job. So yeah, there's no question it affected him. So that's about all the time we have for today, actually, because eventually, Mike, I guess you're going to fall victim as well, because it seems like our hosts are being killed off one at a time. Josh is gone, Kevin's gone, so I'm going to get you out of here before you get hurt or fall to ill will. But no Del's Auto news, which is really crazy, but nothing. That's all I can say. So we'll see you guys again tomorrow, and have a great night. Remember to follow Mike at Mike in Buffalo. Remember to follow Kevin. He's at by Kevin Allen, and Josh is at Josh Rimmer Hockey. So I'm at Eklund. And we will see you tomorrow. Without the buzz, it's just hockey. Talk to you then.